John Ratcliffe. And Congressman, this week you interviewed George Papadopoulos. I want to ask you about this and get a status check on where your investigation stands, looking into the FBI and DOJ's handling of this Trump-Russia investigation. We want to know about George Papadopoulos because this is one of the early individuals that the DOJ and the FBI said was the trigger for them to launch an investigation of collusion between Trump and Russia, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and unfortunately we learned, Maria, this week that the Obama FBI and Justice Department opened up this investigation into whether the Russian government was colluding with the Trump campaign centered around George Papadopoulos, a 28-year-old policy advisor who to this day has never been to Russia and to this day has never knowingly had a conversation with anyone in the Russian government. Maria, the person that bags your groceries at the supermarket has the same number of contacts with Russia and the Russian government as Mr. Papadopoulos, which is zero. One of the troubling things that came out of my questioning is why, if I have seen classified documents that lend support to Mr. Papadopoulos' contention that he had no knowledge or intent to collude with the Russians or anyone on the Trump campaign having that, why he hasn't seen those documents, or why his lawyers haven't seen those documents, or why the judges at the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court haven't seen those documents. So the more people we talk to, the more troubling it is, but it's really the same old story. There's no collusion. There never was collusion. And so that's why we need to talk to folks like Rod Rosenstein to get better answers to what he knows about what the FBI and the Department of Justice were doing back then.
So just to close the loop on Papadopoulos, in other words, there was information, there was certain evidence that would refute claims that there was any interaction between the Trump campaign and Russia, but that information was not given to the FISA court when they went to get the warrant to wiretap American citizens.
So that's my opinion of the classified documents that I have seen. Is evidence that would be favorable to Mr. Papadopoulos' claim and assertion with regard to that. And, the government would have an obligation to turn that over to Mr. Papadopoulos and his lawyers under what's called the Brady Rule. It appears that that did not take place, and I think that's one of the reasons that Mr. Papadopoulos has been public in the recent days talking about moving to withdraw his guilty plea.
Right. He said he may withdraw a guilty plea from the Mueller agreement over misconduct at the DOJ.
Yeah, so he'd have to move to withdraw and convince the court that there is a basis to throw out his plea agreement, which is, again, based on lying to the FBI. But if the government didn't meet its obligations in turning over all evidence that it had that was favorable to his case, then he certainly can make that argument. But setting that issue aside, right, really what's more troubling is how all of this started and why it continued for such a long period of time and why it has consumed the public debate when very clearly folks like George Papadopoulos and Carter Page have little or no connections with anything Russian. But this has been allowed, again, to go on for such a, for a 2-year period of time.